From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Happy spring. My name is Nicholas Brown, and I'm one of the concert producers here in the music division, and we're so thrilled to have you here for this little pre-concert talk today, which is going to delve into some of the library's early music, specifically Renaissance manuscript holdings, and also talk about tonight's program. We're so thrilled to be joined by two of the wonderful singers from Stile Antico. We have Andrew Griffiths and Helen Ashby, so please welcome them. And we'll be joined by my colleague David Plylar of the music division as well as we chat through some things. So we'll have an opportunity for questions. If you do want to ask a question, wait for us to get a microphone to you because we are recording this for the National Collection, which is permanent. So be wonderful citizens that you are when you ask questions. Okay, so let's take it away. So I think first we were going to have Helen chat a bit about Stile Antico for you to give you some background.
Yeah, sorry. Can you all hear me? I'm not sure if this is on. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background information about the group before we get on to the music. We were formed quite a while ago now, in 2001. It was a group of us, 12 of us got together and thought it would be nice to sing some music in the holidays. A lot of us sang together at university in Cambridge. But there's sort of long stretches during the holidays, during the vacation times, when we didn't do any singing at all. And we thought it would be nice to carry that on. So we got together a few times and put on some concerts in Oxford. And we decided from the beginning, really, we sort of evolved a way of working without a conductor, which is slightly unusual for a group of that size. We're not a particularly big group, but generally, with a choir of 12-ish, we'd expect to have a conductor. So this was for a number of reasons. Partly we all wanted to sing rather than conduct, and also we thought it would be an interesting way of exploring the music from the singer's point of view. And this is gradually evolved, and we find it works particularly well with the Renaissance repertoire, because all the parts, unlike later music, generally, in generalising a bit, the repertoire is written with all the parts are equally important. So it's quite nice that everyone gets to have a say in how things are put together. This can be quite rehearsal intensive, is the downside. But the benefits we find is that everyone really gets involved with how we're presenting the music and takes personal ownership of the product and how we feel about the music. And it's a very, it leads to hopefully quite a committed performance from us. We carried on performing this music sort of just in the vacation times originally, and then when we left university in 2005 we took part in a competition in England, and we were lucky enough to be spotted by one of the judges on that. Was the executive producer of Harmonia Mundi USA, which is one of the main record labels, classical record labels over here. And she very kindly invited us to record for that label, and we've now done 7 discs with them, and it's been a very fruitful, ongoing relationship with them. That's one of the reasons that we've been lucky enough to come to the States quite a few times and perform in various different places, although perhaps this is the most glamorous venue we've done so far. This is part of, this performance today is part of a 2.5-week tour. This time we started out in Boston a while ago, two weeks ago or so, and then we went up to Yale University, then to Westport, Connecticut, then we went over to Minneapolis, then a short trip to Canada to take in Vancouver and Vancouver Island. We've just come this morning from Davidson, which is just north of Charlotte, down in North Carolina. So we're enjoying the warm weather. And we've got 2 more stops on this tour. We're doing Kansas City, Missouri after this, and then New York. I'll hand over to Andrew now, who will tell you a little bit more about the repertoire we're singing tonight.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, just a few thoughts about the programme tonight. We've called it Treasures of the Renaissance, which of course is a very subjective title. It gives us a chance to sing you a lot of our favourite things, I think. There are 14 different composers, and we've tried to make sure that all the different important national schools of Renaissance music are represented. We have, within the sacred world, as many different sort of styles of music as well that we could get in there. So contrast really is the watchword. But there are some strands that run through the programme. One, as I say, is the idea of the national schools, and we've grouped them together a little bit. So you'll see at the beginning of the programme, we begin with works by Gombert, by Clemens non Papa, and by, I've forgotten, Lassus. So 3 Flemish composers. And of course, the Flemish composers were, of their time, perhaps the superstars. They travelled very widely. Flanders, which, roughly speaking, modern-day Belgium, was ruled at that time by the Spanish. And so a lot of these composers were headhunted by the Spanish royal court, and they went to Spain. They formed what was called the Capilla Flamenca, which was the Flemish Chapel Royal, in fact, the Spanish Chapel Royal. And 2 of those composers, Gombert and Lassus, both travelled. Gombert to Spain, Lassus, in fact, to Italy, and then later on to Munich, where he spent most of his career. So their music was very widely disseminated, was very influential, and you'll hear it's very sophisticated, often very dense, harmonically really, really rich. Set against that is the music from England, which maintained really throughout most of the period a wonderful kind of insularity and difference from what was going on the continent. The English Channel seemed to have been a rather wide berth for music to cross, and it wasn't really until the end of the period that musical printing took off to the extent that Tallis and Bird were exported. I think music from the continent came the other way, but maybe a little bit earlier. And so we have music from before the Reformation in England and also music from after the Reformation. So in the first half of the concert, before intermission, we have what we could call Catholic pieces, a wonderful piece of Tallis in Passe, which is a piece written for the service of Compline, the last service of the day. Very much downbeat in mood, very almost deliberately soporific. And after that, an extraordinary piece by William Byrd, Vigilate, Wake Up, the text saying, make sure you don't go to sleep because you don't know when the Lord will come and he might catch you asleep. So chalk and cheese, those 2 pieces. Byrd, of course, is a very interesting case. He was a lifelong Catholic composer, I'm sure some of you know, writing mostly during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, which was, of course, a Protestant reign. And he was a not very secret Catholic, and indeed enjoyed Elizabeth's protection as one of the 2 composers to be granted the monopoly of printing music in England at that time, along with Thomas Tallis, his teacher. So Byrd trod rather a fine line. We know that he attended the secret Catholic masses that were going on in the country houses, particularly in East Anglia, the east of England, and other people that attended those meetings, and particularly the priests who officiated, ended up in prison or fined, and some of them were martyred. So Byrd lived life dangerously, and in publishing music with Tallis in Latin in that time, he was taking a bit of a risk, particularly in publishing, as he did, Latin masses, which could really only have had one use. The motets, he could have argued, would have been designed for domestic use. So composers kept on writing in Latin for perhaps groups of musical dilettantes, people with a bit of money in their pockets who could buy printed music, to be sitting around after dinner, getting out the book of Polyphony to have a bit of a sing after a couple of good glasses of wine as a way of finishing off the evening. After intermission, the English music is certainly post-Reformation. So we have music from Thomas Tomkins, from Orlando Gibbons, perhaps the 2 chief composers from that time, and also rather interesting setting of the Lord's Prayer by John Shepherd. We usually think of Shepherd as a composer that comes before the Reformation, the sort of the Holy Trinity of Taverner, Tallis, and Shepherd before the Reformation. But this piece survives actually in an arrangement for viols, but one of the parts is texted with the Lord's Prayer, so we know it's a Lord's Prayer, and you can reconstruct the rest. And you'll hear that the text is not quite the text that you know for the Lord's Prayer, and that's because it was so early on in proceedings that the official form of words haven't been finalised, so it's actually a different translation from the Latin than the one that we're used to hearing today. The final strand running through the concert, perhaps, is settings of the Song of Songs from the Old Testament. As you know, a book of really rather, frankly, erotic love poetry from the Old Testament. And I believe I'm right in saying that except for the Psalms, it was the most widely set book of the Bible in the whole period. Something about it, perhaps the colours of the text, attracted composers of that time. Almost exclusively continental composers, and these are continental settings. So in fact, 2 of the Flemish pieces I talked about already, Clemens's Ego Flos Campi and the Lassus Veni Dilecte Me, our Song of Songs text, And we return to that at the end of the concert. So we have a wonderfully exuberant and entirely unsacred in feeling piece by Vivanco for double choir, very flirtatious, very madrigalian in character. And also, the other end of that spectrum, a very mystical, mysterious piece by a Spanish composer, Rodrigo de Ceballos, not so well known, called Hortus Conclusus, and it's that wonderful metaphor, my lover is like a secret garden. And he perhaps takes the more metaphorical interpretation of this text, traditionally, you know, the relationship between the bridegroom Christ and his church. And that brings us on to, of course, Spanish and Italian music. We do also include a piece by each of the great Italian and Spanish masters. So we have Palestrina's Exultate Deo, which is, I'm sure some of you know, very exuberant, full of evocations of musical instruments. And to finish off that little segment, we have O Magnum Mysterium by Victoria, which doesn't need much introduction. The odd one out, of course, is by John McCabe, who is, as you know, not a Renaissance composer, but a 21st century British composer. But it's a reimagining of a medieval text that was set by a composer called William Cornish. So it's a text that takes its starting point, and a piece that takes its starting point from Renaissance music, but draws out some threads and comes up with something much more modern and contemporary. It's a piece that was written especially for Stile Antico, and we premiered it in 2009.
Great. We're going to let Helen and Andrew go eat so that they can be singing on a full tank of goodness with food. So we would like to thank them, and we're going to continue on with this presentation, but if you could all just give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.